Hi guys, Ronnie here and welcome to the workshop. Today I will present my new Factor Ostro gravel bike, which we were planning to do a very nice build video about, but unfortunately we got technical issues, so all of that footage has been lost. Now the bike has been built and it's ready, so I will just talk you through how the final build turned out and what components are used and what are the main features of this frame set. It's basically a brand new product, so I can give you an exclusive and detailed overview of it, which I don't think many sources have published yet. So this will be my take, and then in the latter part of the video I'll also tell you a little bit about how it rides and my first impressions of this bike. So let's start with the features of the frame set, and let's start with the front of the bike as usual. So the frame set and part of it, well, it's really a typical Factor product. So we have the wide bow-legged fork shape, even more pronounced like on the road-going Ostro. This is, well, firstly, since it's an off-road bike, it gives you a lot of tire clearance, 45 millimeters in this instance, so that's pretty huge for a race-oriented gravel bike. But it also has aerodynamic implications, so it enables the wheel around, the air around the front wheel to flow freely in the fork, so there's no stalling, which is good for aerodynamics and can still be applied on this gravel bike. Obviously it's a standard 12 by 100 mm through axle fork. The good thing about Factor frames is that the threaded insert in the fork is replaceable should anything go wrong with it. And yeah, you get a nice through axle machined aluminum with a 6 mm through axle interface, Allen key interface, so all pretty standard stuff. Then if we go further down to the head tube, this is where the design of the Ostro VAM has been slightly modified. So we still have the solid lube technology bearings like you do get there. So this means that the headset bearings, which are made by Ceramic Speed, they have this solid polymer inside, so they don't need any grease and thus don't need any servicing, which is a great thing on a bike like this because both brake hoses run through them, so it's a bit of a job to replace them. This way that's not an issue, and you can wash it and ride it in dirt conditions without any problems. The difference here is that the head tube itself is slightly wider on top, so you do get the same size bearing, and this is to accept a standard 31.8 mm 1 1/8 inch stereo tube, whereas the road going version has a D-shaped cutoff stereo tube where the brake hoses run on the front of that section. So basically that completed with a wedge creates the round section that the stem clamps onto. This is a standard steerer and you need that extra space of the larger bearing, so the brake hoses run through the front of it. This makes for an easier setup when it comes to choosing different stem options, so basically you can fit any standard stem that you have. But we also do get a new black ink integrated bar and stem with this new bike, which can be also retrofitted to the Ostro VAM and the other VAM models. So this bar and stem, as I said, it's a one piece, it's a pretty modern design, so the drops are with a compact shape, very slight flare to it to enable some wrist clearance when riding out of the saddle. The very nice feature of this bar is that you have various widths. This particular one that I have is the narrowest 36 centimeter bar, and the good thing is that it can be still equipped with the longest stem option, so that's rarely the case with other bar and stems. And it also comes with a very neat aluminum machined computer mount attachment. There's a single and a dual version, so one to mount your computer onto, and the other one to mount accessories such as lights, cameras, etc. So that's the handlebar. Obviously everything is internally routed through it, which is a very neat setup. The top shape is aerodynamic, as you would expect, pretty narrow and very flattened, with a truncated airfoil at the back. And also the interesting thing is that the shape of the hoods bows back towards slightly, so it's a more ergonomic shape when holding it on the tops. So that's pretty much it about the handlebar. As for the rest of the frame, going further back, the top tube does have an attachment point for top tube bags, unlike the road going version, but this is pretty standard on gravel bikes. Also, it no longer has the slight indentation that you do get on the road frame because of the attachment. However, the down tube is pretty similar, I would say almost identical to the road version. So you still get the recessed fork right here, and you get basically a very wide camtail section all the way down to the bottom bracket. This shields the water bottles also very neatly, so that's a good thing. The bottom bracket itself is a threaded asymmetric T47, which is basically very similar to a Servo BB Ride standard, except it does have the T47 thread, which is a very practical thing because, well, it's easier to service. The bottom bracket cups are actually included with the frame set, so these come from Ceramic Speed, so a very high quality unit, and you do get various reducers, so you can fit 30mm, 29mm dub and 24mm spindles, so it's basically compatible with any crank system that you get on the market right now. Above the bottom bracket there's a removable derailleur hanger. I have a 2x setup on it right now, so that's not really an issue. Then the seat tube and the seat stays, they're also very similar to the road version of the Ostro VAM, so extremely thin seat stays, also aerodynamically shaped for better compliance, and also aero shaped seat tube. The seat post itself, however, is slightly different. It uses the same clamping mechanisms, so there's a wedge internally in the frame which you press onto the seat tube using a threaded insert, so that's the same. And also the shape of the seat post is the same, however it does have a different clamping mechanism for the saddle rails. So now it's no longer a one bolt system, it's a two bolt design, and the advantage of it is that you don't need separate clamping gears for different types of saddle rails. So in that regard, it's a bit more practical. If you go further down to the chainstay area, this is also where it's slightly different from the road version. So in order to accommodate the larger tires without stretching the chainstays too much, they're slightly dropped, but otherwise they're pretty similar in terms of shape. The frame itself weighs 950 grams in this black color scheme. Obviously the white one will weigh more. This is a very minimal, very thin layer of paint. As you can see, the carbon weave is visible right through, which I think is pretty cool. Weight wise, if you compare it to others, well, it's very light for a bike of this level of aerodynamic shaping, and even more so if you consider that it's off-road worthy as well, so that's pretty impressive. One thing I did change on the frame immediately is that I went through a direct mount derailleur hanger for the Shimano rear max, so that's something I do on all of my bikes. It's just a neater and more secure setup. As for the components, I'm using an Ultegra R8100 group set here, so the new 12-speed version. I was considering to carry over the GRX Di2 that I had on my previous gravel bike, but I like the lever shape a lot more on this new group set version, and I just prefer how the shifting feels and works. It's just I wouldn't say it's a huge upgrade, but it's certainly a noticeable improvement, so that's good. Also, it's more practical because of the semi-wireless setup. You already have servo wave like with GRX on these road levers, so you're not losing anything in that regard. The calipers have the new design with more pad clearance, so that's nice when riding off-road. In dirty conditions you get less brake rub. And the cassette has the same range like I was using before, 11 to 34, but since it's now 12 speed, the jumps are much more manageable and they feel much nicer when riding at speed. So yeah, really happy with this group set choice. And one thing it doesn't have is that the clutch is missing from the rear mech, but I don't really find this to be an issue because the clutch on the GRX version doesn't work very well either. So you do get a tiny amount of chain slap, but it's really nothing serious. So that's the group set. I've already talked about the handlebar. The wheels and the tires, everything on them, are carried over from the previous setup, so they're Challenge Getaway HTLR tires, so a very fast rolling tire, nice handmade compound, also pretty grippy. Setup tubeless obviously, and they also have tire inserts, which are great thing for gravel and off-road riding in general. The wheels are heads, they're the top of the line Emporia GC3 Pros, which are very wide, hookless, and have a slight aero shape in them. So they're nice and compliant, excellent wheel set for gravel. 140mm rotors, front and rear, so that's pretty much standard stuff for me. The saddle also is a carryover from the previous bike, so this is the Fabric Line S Pro. It's a saddle that I really like and got on really well with for the past year or so, so no reason to change there. And then we have the Silca titanium bottle cages. This is to prevent the bottles wearing away the carbon bottle cage when dirt gets between the two interfaces, so they're just more secure. One thing I did have to modify slightly on the front mech is that I had to remove the cable guide that comes with it because it was touching the tire, and I had to zip tie the wire going to the front mech to the chain catcher so it doesn't get in the way. But yeah, it's a bit of a botch, but works well in this situation. And finally, the cranks. The front ratio is 52-36, so semi-compact for efficiency. And Dura-Ace chainrings, obviously, for the best possible shifting. Rotor Aldo 30mm crank arms, aluminum version. These are just more resilient when it comes to rock strikes, which do happen on gravel. And the power meter is a Power2Max NG SL, so the top of the line version, rechargeable, and the lightweight cutaway version for Shimano chainrings. So all the good stuff that I usually have on my bikes. So yeah, this is the build. Weighs in at 8.1 kilos, and I'm really happy with how it rides and how it turns out, but I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Okay guys, so as you can see, the bike is now ready, and I think it looks pretty awesome. Probably the coolest looking bike of all bikes that I have, and quite surely the coolest looking gravel bike that I've ever had. The main point for me, as I said earlier in this video, is to make it as close as possible to my road bike in feel and fit. So that's the first thing I did really. I put it in the kicker roller, took out the laser measuring device and just adjusted the saddle position. And well, the bar position is more or less fixed. I had to calculate that based on the numbers from the road bike. And basically, apart from the width of the handlebar, everything is exactly the same or very, very close. And I immediately felt at home when riding it. The handling is very familiar, and the way it just responds to the inputs in the corners and on the rough stuff, it's yeah, that's I think the biggest compliment you can give to a bike is that you get on it and you immediately feel at home. Then we were fooling around a little bit with jumps and taking corners and stuff, and it also felt right at home there. Everything fits, the shifting works perfectly, the gearing is just right. The wheels work well, I already have been using those, so really happy with how it turned out. One slight issue that I found is, I didn't expect that, to be honest. When we were doing these little jumps, on a harder landing, the rear mech went into its protective crash mode for some reason. Then I had to reset it because it stopped shifting. Probably not a thing you encounter during a race, but yeah, I didn't really expect that. And yeah, as I said, the other things work exactly as they should. There's no rattling, no creaking. Yeah, very good bike all around. For the weight weenies out there, the weight turned out to be 8.1 kilos, so all in except the water bottles. So I think that's pretty damn competitive for a gravel bike, and more so for an aero gravel bike with tire inserts and chain device, power meter. Really everything is on there that you need to race. So that's, I think, a big plus as well. In fact, it's lighter than most mid-range road bikes, so also particularly, or probably down to the fact that the paint job is very minimalistic, that also saves a bit of weight. But yeah, light, stiff, handles great, so really happy with it so far, and we'll see how it performs in the long run. If you'd like to see that, then of course don't forget to tune into the channel to see future updates on this bike and keep the notifications on. That's all for today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.